Coming to you live from my office here at University of Nebraska, Lincoln. It's Trio 30 Talk, first generation discussion. Last week we had Stephen Hart on to talk all about his first generation experience and working here at UNL. And today we have another episode with a very esteemed guest, I think. My boss's boss. We have the great Assistant Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, TJ McDowell Jr. TJ, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you? I mean, I really appreciate that warm introduction.
I am super excited that you're here today because you're in Student Affairs. You work with all our students. We're with a vast amount of programs across campus. I feel like you're really in touch with the students. All I hear is good things. Students really enjoy when you come and talk with them and when you're at the presentations. And you just have a really good energy about you, TJ, that I just wish I aspired to be like. I'm just saying. So.
Well, you bring a lot of energy yourself, so I think you got it. You got to set your sights a little higher. Set your sights a little higher.
There we go. Well, TJ, thank you again for joining us. We're going to go ahead and jump right into it. This, again, just for anyone new listening on the podcast or our YouTube. This series is dedicated for first-gen students, first-gen faculty, staff, parents of first-gen students to listen to hear about different stories, different trials and tribulations, I guess you can say, some celebrations of what it means to be a first-gen student, some advice you might have to learn about that. So you can kind of just wait a chance for our current students to kind of hear about some things, to be like, hey, this is something I'm struggling with or something I need to learn more about, to get in touch with resources here on campus for our first gen and trio students. So TJ, let's just start off with your journey into higher education from when you were, getting into ready to go to college, your first year and throughout.
Yeah, it's so interesting when I think about how I ended up in my role at the University of Nebraska. It's kind of surreal. It's a very unlikely story. Because I'm literally a homeboy. I've been a Husker my whole life. I grew up at 3129 Dudley, where you and I could walk to the house I grew up in about 30 minutes. And so I could hear, when you were playing that music, I could hear that on game day from my house. Now, I couldn't afford to go to the games, but I could hear it from my house. And so I am a first generation college kid. My dad is from rural Mississippi. He did not graduate from high school, and my mom graduated from high school and had me a year and a half later. And so I did not grow up in a home where either one of my parents had a college education, and where one of my parents, my father is not a great reader or writer, and in fact has avoided jobs or any opportunities where that was part of it. So yeah, I didn't have the kind of parental support to get me through college. In fact, when I say that my parents didn't help me navigate college, they did set me up to be successful in my early, kindergarten through 12th grade year. My mom is a really funny person. She had heard a study before I started kindergarten that kids who ate breakfast did better in school. And so my mom locked in on that. Like, it had nothing to do with anything else. It's about eggs and sausage for breakfast, and you did good in school. And so I literally had a hot breakfast every single day before school growing up.
Wow.
There was no such thing as cold cereal in my house. And so although my parents couldn't help me, apply to colleges, they didn't have that background, but what they did was, they made sure that school, my K-12 education was a priority. They made sure I went to school every day. They made sure I had clean clothes, but they're very supportive. But and then I went to Nebraska Wesleyan for my undergrad degree, and my parents never, not one day, ever stepped foot on that campus.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
so they kind of supported you from
a distance.
From a distance.
Yeah, they didn't go on any of my college visits. They did not do anything. My first year leaving, they gave me $250 for books, and my books were $400. Thankfully, I had a job so I could cover the rest. And that was the extent of my financial support from my parents. That was the last financial support I received from my parents.
Oh man, wow.
Yeah.
So you're pretty much on your own financially, on your
Yep.
own just physically, I guess. I mean, I guess the emotional support is there from a distance, but
Yeah, and my parents, in fairness to them, they didn't understand financial aid or majors, or they didn't know anything about this culture that exists on a college campus. So it's no, I mean, I don't fault them for it. They just didn't know how to do it, and it was a little bit intimidating to be on a college campus. And when I first got to college, I didn't think I belonged. I mean, I was a poor Black kid at a I think I always say this is the number I have locked in my head. There were 420 in my first year class, 6 Black students. And so it felt like everybody else was white. It felt like everybody else had a lot more money, and like everybody else understood what was happening, like they knew things. And so it took a while for me to navigate that. I was fortunate that I early on in my tenure found both. I sought out and found some mentors on the faculty and staff who helped me navigate, answered my questions, encouraged me, believed in me, was my cheerleader. And then I was really fortunate that my really good friend from 4th grade was my roommate. And so we were able to kind of support each other and navigate and encourage each other. And when we would deal with some of the craziness that you deal with, being a Black student on a college campus, it wasn't really made for you.
Was your friend also a first generation college student?
He was. He was.
Okay, so you guys were kind of in it together. Not having a lot of information.
Yeah, and Antoine, he then went on to be a superintendent in Oakland, California, and Washington, D.C. And he's now on the faculty at Nebraska Wesleyan and is my daughter's advisor. My daughter's a senior in college now, and Antoine, my roommate and friend since 4th grade, is her advisor.
Oh, wow. That's a really good story. Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, how you talk about your parents, it's kind of like, I always think of college as like a whole new language to, if you don't know it, or you're not sure what the lingo is, it can be very like, not sure what's happening, right? We use all these acronyms, we use all these things, all these locations, and sometimes it just kind of goes way over someone's head if you're not familiar with that, which can be a real struggle. You talked about some mentors a little bit. We talked about this with Stephen this past week, but I want to really touch into a little bit more about how these mentors really kind of persuaded you to be where you are today, and like that. What are some of the things that they may have said to you that kind of have stuck with you till today?
Well, one is that they in some ways validated my experience and said, yeah, what you're feeling is real. You don't, and it's okay. That they had, and one of them had experienced those same things, and so it was really helpful to know that I wasn't the only one. But I think probably the thing they did most was that they just believed in me and kept encouraging me not to give up on those days where you're like, I can't believe I'm dealing with this. And the thing for me, academically, it was never really so much about academics. Antoine and I went into Nebraska Wesleyan, and we literally went in with the goal of being on the Dean's List our first semester. 3.75 is needed for Dean's List, and we each had 3.72 or 3.73, so we just missed it. So academically, how would it take? I came in, I worked hard. I availed myself of the resources so I could be successful academically. For me, the struggle was culturally not feeling like I fit, like I belonged in terms of the broader campus, especially that first semester. But one of the things that I did that helped, that now it's so cool for me to have some leadership of the areas that were so important, so instrumental to me being successful as I navigated the college experience. So I became a resident assistant second semester of my first year. I started a multicultural RSO looking at diversity issues. I was a campus ambassador. I was real involved with our other equity programs, our gender inclusive place. And so I became really involved in campus, and that helped me then find some connections that kind of broadened my circle a little bit. But that first semester, it felt very lonely and very isolated.
Yeah, that is, I think, one of our struggles we're still dealing with today, right? Is that those first few months. I mean, I think about today right now, I think, if you're listening to this right now, it's November 15th, 2021. And our students right now are still struggling with some of the things you're talking about. I've heard, we're just coming out of a pandemic too, but it's still almost the same feeling of the stressful, feeling isolated and not really sure how to fit in and belong. And that's what we're here to hopefully let you know that you're not alone out there and doing that. There's plenty of people who are going to be going through this. Stephen also mentioned he was an RA in the last one as well. And I've been telling everyone that's like a first gen boot camp kind of, because you get to learn all the resources on campus. So when you were talking about that isolation a little bit, and you talked to your mentors and you had your friend Antoine, what is there another piece that kind of helped you get through that, or is it just taking some time and waiting for that first semester to get over to get really into the organizations and things like that?
So to be honest, I had a psychology professor who was a full-time child psychologist. And after that first semester, we didn't call it therapy then, but I did therapy with him twice a month to help me navigate that experience I was having on campus. And Dr. Bill McNeil was his name, and he was a phenomenal faculty member. I loved his teaching because he brought in his real world experience to whatever the content we were talking about. It brought it alive to me. And then he just really, he just cared about me. And then he was on the board of an organization called the Lighthouse, and he hooked me up with a job. So after my first year at Nebraska Western, I started working at the Lighthouse, which my job at Lighthouse that I started at 19, the summer after my freshman year in college, led to every other job I've had. It was like professional skill development. And so I'm really fortunate to Dr. McNeil. And then I had other faculty. My advisor was Dr. Iaquina, who was in the sociology department. Patrick Hayden Roy was a history professor who was really instrumental. Dr. Scott Corbett, who was a history professor. Tanya Horn, who worked in admissions, but she was also kind of like the multicultural student support person. And so I was very fortunate that I had a number of faculty and staff that looked out for me.
That's all. And so when I think about that, if you can remember back to when were you the one that reached out, or were they the ones that are like, hey, TJ, come talk to me. I know you might be struggling, or were you like, I need to seek this person out?
My psychology professor, first semester of my first year, there was some writing assignment we did where I talked about how I was feeling early on. And then he initiated the outreach after that.
Good.
Okay. Yeah. And then my advisor, I sought him out in part because I wanted to minor in Black Studies. And I said, we don't have Black Studies, but we can create this American Minorities minor. And I saw that he was open. I saw that he was open to those kind of things. So he kind of drew me in. And then Tanya, who works in admissions, I had known her when I was visiting campus. And so she was like a familiar face, and she was Black. So I could go talk to her and literally shut her door and say, man, this is crazy that I'm dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah, I can only imagine. Obviously, I'm a white male. I can only, you said what, only 6 people are Black students in your college, university, and Nebraska Wesleyan.
In our first year class. There were a few upper class, but in that first year class.
In the first year class, yeah, but still, that's still, if you multiply the numbers, that's 24, right?
Yeah. It's a small percentage.
Yeah. And so I can only imagine. And so I think that's really important as we're talking, and hopefully students will be listening to this, to be like, you got to reach out to some people who might have familiar experiences as you. Like, if you're dealing with that feeling like you're fitting in, and you're a person of color, Brian's probably not the best person maybe to go to, and finding those people on campus. And there are people. It's not completely all white people out here. There are people of color who are in higher positions, like TJ, like even Stephen as well, who can really help some people with that experience if you're looking for that. I think it's really important if you're feeling that way to reach out and see if you can have a conversation. And as far as I know, people here at Nebraska Nice is a big thing here, and people will gladly accept having some coffee or a lunch to talk to you and feel and kind of help you through that process and that transition.
Well, and for those students of color in particular, first generation students, I feel like that's why I'm here. And so it really is not it's not an addition for me. It's not an addition to the job. It is the job.
Yeah.
And so when I first started, I heard from some Black students how important it was, how few people of color, how few Black in particular, folks had access to. So it became a real important high priority for me to make sure that I'm available and accessible to students. In fact, I'm going to meet with a student who emailed me on Friday and to meet with me, this will be my first time meeting with a student. So I try to avail myself and make myself available to students for that thing, because it's really important, I think, when you're navigating higher ed, to have some mentors you can literally touch. You can literally go into their office or meet them for coffee, and you can literally ask them questions in person. I think that's so important. So, and I've actually started trying to formalize I'm trying to quantify that work, so that when I do my goals and when I talk about where I'm trying to do, is that part of it is built into what I'm doing every day.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I would say I've been at a few campuses, and for all you other, TJ is the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, right? That's a very, it's a pretty big title. It's like 3 steps away from the Chancellor, roughly, right? Right, of the university, right? Yeah, that's a big deal. He's modest, but
there's several assistant vice chancellors.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I get it. But you know what I'm saying? If you look at the hierarchy, and when I've been at other campuses, at your position, there's not many people reaching out for students and on a Friday and then meeting with them on a Monday, is what I'm trying to say. So if you're a Nebraska student, you have to take, and we're a large Big Ten, we're a Big Ten university, and so this is a really opportunity to use your resources, right? And TJ is just a great resource.
Well, to that point, I don't think anybody should work in student affairs if they're not going to put students first. And for me, it puts all the other aspects of the job in context and in perspective if I'm having regular communication with students.
Yeah, well said. That is well. So some people might be curious. Okay, we talked a little bit about your position. Like, what is your job? What was your major? I guess I actually don't know what your major was, and how did you get into this position? And we talked a little bit about your why, but yeah,
that's an interesting saga. So my undergraduate degree is in sociology. I actually went planning to be a history social science teacher, ended up getting a degree in sociology. I had minors in women's studies and American minorities because I was planning to teach, and I wanted to incorporate those perspectives into my teaching. And you can't teach what you don't know, so I minored in those 2 subjects. And then I did my master's at the university in education, and I was really focused on K-12 education at that time. And it was really about the academic success of Black males. That was that was my big focus in my master's program. I kind of lucked out in the higher ed. I wasn't intending on coming to higher ed. That wasn't my plan. I had been a nonprofit administrator for 20 years. And so I was actually working for the public schools on an initiative to increase graduation rates of groups of students that weren't graduating at a high level. So students of color and pregnant and parenting teens, students who've been involved with the justice system. So I was working on an initiative to increase graduation rates. I'd done that for about 4 years. And I'd also served on the Board of Governors in Nebraska Wesleyan. And so my board term had finished, and the president asked me to breakfast, and I didn't realize it at the time. It was a job interview. And I think it was about a month after we had breakfast that I started working at Nebraska Wesleyan. And I went as an assistant dean of students, focused primarily on diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And every year, I was there for 4 years, and every year I got added, my title changed, and I got new responsibilities. So in my second year, I added Title IX coordinator. In my third year, I became associate vice president, overseeing human resources and athletics, and continuing as a Title IX coordinator. And then in my fourth year, I became the vice president and oversaw what we would think of as student affairs. But in the small Division III area, the athletic director also reported to me, so I oversaw athletics as well.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a lot. And then you made the transition over here to UNL?
Yeah. And then I knew someone who told me that university was restructuring student affairs and that I'd be a great fit for this assistant vice chancellor for student life and leadership. And so, I I didn't know if I'd be qualified. I didn't know if I would, I was new to higher ed. I would be going from a school with 1,500 students to a school with 25,000, but I went through it, and I'm grateful I did. I love being here. I love the work that I do every day.
That's great. That's awesome. And so we talked a little bit about the why, and I think for those that know TJ, I think one of his interview questions is, who do you work for? If you don't say students, you're probably not going to get hired, right? And so I think so. Talk a little bit more about you, a little bit more of the why. We know that you're here for students, working for the students. But what's the thing that's like going to get you out of bed every day to help those students?
So I believe that whenever we go through challenging times in our life, trials and tribulations, whenever we go through those tough things in life, that the reason why we go through them is so that when we get to the other side of that challenge, that then we can reach back and help those who are going through a similar challenge. So for me, I see now on this side how incredibly transformative a college education has been for my own life, in terms of the doors it's opened and opportunities it's given me, for just the experiences my children have had. It was the high school students were taking the ACT a couple I don't know, a month ago or so. So we were talking about it, and when I was a senior in high school, I didn't know what the ACT was. And so all I understood was that it was a test that you needed to take to get into college. You needed to get a 20 in order to get in. So I took the ACT, got a 21, and did no prep or nothing, and was like super excited. Like I got a 21, like I won the lottery or something. And I remember, talking about it with my friends, and it was like, man, I got a 21. I can get into college now. And my friends were like, man, you're smart. You got a 21. And so I had no idea what it was. Fast forward, my daughter, who's now a senior in Nebraska Wesleyan, she gets a 29, and my son got a 32. I grew up in a home where there were very few books that were owned in the house. My kids grew up around books, and my son has a library, and my daughter. So the transformative, not only was my college education transformative for me, but it's been transformative for the next generations in my family. And so I see that power. So for me, it's all about helping the next generation, helping them navigate. If I can do something to make their college education a little easier, to make the navigation a little less stressful, to let them know there's at least one person in their corner cheering for them, supporting them, pulling for them, and it allows them to get through the other side so that they can experience the transformative power of education. That's why I'm here.
That is well said. I can't say anything else to add to that. That is well said. And so before we leave today, what is that one piece of advice that you have for our first gen students here at UNL?
Find an accountability partner. Now, I talk about a lot. It's become more valuable to me as I look back on my own experience. When I think back to what really was the difference for me, it was, and of course I didn't know it at the time. Antoine being my roommate and being someone who I spent a lot of time with, we really held each other accountable. We had similar goals in terms of, GPA and all that kind of stuff, and our academic excellence and our focus. We had similar career aspirations. So we just we never talked about it. We just said, hey, we just encourage each other. So the way that worked for me is that there were days when I didn't feel like doing the work. Like I didn't feel like going to class or writing a paper. And Antoine would say, no, T, come on, let's get this work in. And there were days when he didn't feel like it. And I could say, no, Antoine, let's get this work in. And so as a result, we both graduated at 3.8, and one of the coolest things that I'll ever experience in my life is I was the vice president at Nebraska Wesleyan. So I'm on the stage with the administrative team in the cap and gown at commencement. And Antoine received an honorary doctorate. He was our keynote speaker at a commencement. And it was so surreal to be sitting there on the stage, looking out at the grads and their families and this joyous occasion. And my accountability partner is the keynote speaker getting an honorary doctorate. And, we reflect on that a lot. And so find someone who's going to hold you accountable, who's going to push you to excel and achieve. Find someone who's going to who wants the best for you and isn't gonna let you settle for anything less than the best for yourself.
Oh, that is great. That's good stuff. I'm gonna have to clip that saying and just put it on repeat in her office. So I really appreciate that, TJ. So everyone, thank you. Make sure you get out and meet TJ. I wouldn't say, not 100 people send him an email, but I'm sure he'll get to you if that happens. But
yeah,
make sure you get a chance to meet TJ in our office. He's willing to help work with our students. Former first gen student himself, growing up in Nebraska as well, which I think is important for those students who are maybe feeling they're not sure how to connect to the university. TJ might be able to help you get through that. As always, if you are listening or watching on YouTube, feel free to check in with us. Use this QR code or head to our link to click and say, hey, I watched this episode of this podcast or listen, and I want to know more. I want some more resources, or hey, I want to learn about this. Give us some comments, give us some feedback. Also, let us know that you came in so we can add you onto our list to say that you watched. And then, as always, we are on Spotify and Apple iTunes. Feel free to look for us, Trio 30 Talks, again, on iTunes and Spotify. Listen to us. Give us a 5-star rating if you want. Give us some comments. Give us some feedback. We're always looking for that. So check us out, Trio 30 Talks. And then if you're looking for us on social media, we are at UNL Trio Scholars on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Again, check us out, UNL Trio Scholars. Again, that does it for another episode of Trio 30 Talk. TJ, thank you so much. I know you're very busy for scheduling 30 minutes with me. I really appreciate it. I hope our students are able to learn a lot from you. Again, thank you so much. Any last thoughts?
Thanks for having me. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for having me, and thanks for all that you do to support Trio Scholars every day. So I'm grateful to you.
Thank you very much. And everyone, as always, go Big Red.